How many of us were taught from an extremely young age, respect your elders, respect your elders, they're older than you, respect them. And how many of you remember thinking, why should I? Just because they're older than me, why does that mean that I have to respect them if they're not doing things that I respect?
There is a big difference between being a biological adult versus being a psychologically developed adult. Just because you've aged and you have the years underneath your belt does not mean you have grown, and certainly does not mean inherently everyone should listen to your stories.
Hey everybody, what is going on? It's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It's Emilia. B and I are in the feels of this episode to just break some ice here. I know that this topic we've talked before on this podcast episode around emotional immaturity, which is actually ironically going to be my episode suggestion for this one. And just before we got started on this recording, it was very much of the dialogue between she and I saying, if she and I don't have this dialogue, who the hell will? Who the hell will have these dialogues that are uncomfortable, that might feel a little bit like people are being called out? And that's not what our intention is in this episode. But our intention definitely is rooted in some concerns that we have for the future, especially when it comes to people, when it comes to quote unquote adults. And I'm doing air quotes for anyone that's listening to this on simply audio, because more and more Bianca and I are seeing people behind the scenes in the coaching and the therapy practice that we have. And y'all, just be real. Some of the biologically older people that we see, their psychological development is actually extremely young. And what happens when you have people who are, let's just say, 45 years old in the biological manner, right? Their body has aged to 45 years old, and yet they are a man child or a woman child, and psychologically they're still only 6 years old. What that actually is impacting is the way in which they're showing up in the world, the way in which they're raising their kids, they're speaking to their kids, they're raising and impacting future generations, and the way in which they're navigating life. And obviously, we are not holding intrinsic judgments towards people. It is so much more rooted in, we want to help support people who are experiencing, as they age, they feel stuck. As they age biologically, they don't know why they're caught up in these patterns, why they're not evolving in the way in which they want to, and why life is just kind of turning out the way in which they least expected it to, right? They're in their 40s and their kids hate them and don't have relationships with them, or they're in their 60s and, don't know how to transition out of a very old mindset where, you can't teach a new dog or an old dog new tricks. Like, just that. And the concern really revolving around this is like, what are we doing to improve the way in which we are psychologically developing, and to what extent, and how are we opening up our minds, our hearts, our souls, our psychology to the actual development that actually hasn't gotten done? And so this conversation is real, it's raw, and my hope is that by the end of this episode, you and I have set some groundwork for future episodes, number one, and then number two, for anyone that's tuning in here, wherever they quote unquote are on the biological scale, right? So whether you're 7 years old or 18 or 28 or 48, 58, 68, whatever, it doesn't matter your biological age, you can at least take something from this episode that helps you realize that just because you are either headed towards or you've been an adult doesn't necessarily mean that you've grown, and what you can do about that. So B, I want to talk about adult development for a little bit and kind of peel the curtain behind something that I've been contemplating on my own accord, to be honest. because when we get behind the scenes and we hear these life stories of people, and we go on interviews and we get interviewed and we kind of get behind the scenes of people's actual life, we experience their central nervous system. They overreact to certain things. And, you know, I'm always researching and analyzing. One of the things the question that I've been churning around in this big old brain of mine has been, how many people globally have actually reached that psychological development of adult maturation? Like, how many statistically like, what, when we look at the population in a nutshell, what percentage, if we were to put that in a pie chart, if you will, what percentage of the population are actually developed from an adult maturation standpoint and match their biological age?
Can you give a definition of what that, like, give a character subset of what that would be? So, like, what are the things that you're looking at, so we can have shared definitions with whoever's listening?
Yeah, absolutely. The model of which someone is thinking, the frame in which someone's thinking, the core beliefs that are structured, the identities that they have and holds, the way in which they are able to actualize their own life. If they want something, what are they doing, and how do they navigate the decision-making process in order to achieve their goals and dreams? What is their emotional impulse control? How do they regulate their own central nervous system? Do they have co-regulation, self-regulation skill sets? What are their coping mechanisms? How do they exist really in life? And one of the key components is, how much are people specifically overly reliant on their social network? Because one of the correlations that I found in some of the research is that, and again, I'm not going to broad brush, but what I'm finding when I'm researching is that most people who are overly reliant upon their social networks are actually wildly underdeveloped in a central nervous system standpoint, emotional regulation skill sets, and on a maturity level from an actual adult psychological standpoint. So for example, I have someone that I know that is like ridiculously good at networking and is such a social butterfly, and like, take all of their network away from them and they would have a panic attack, because simply they have no idea how to actualize their life on their own accord. And that's why they need people like the air that they breathe. And so with that being said, it's posed the question of how many of us, especially as now you and I are in our 30s, like as adults here, it's like we're entering into this new phase of having so much education in our belt, if you will, and looking around and saying, wait a second, like, I thought everyone was going to be as developed in this stage. And then we see people all the time and they're psychologically less developed, right? They're overreacting to some of the smallest things, or they're triggered so much easier than if one had that development level they would be. So when I started to actually break it down, B, and I'd be curious to hear what adult developmental, not just research, but in general, just like adult maturity, developmental psychology, like around that, we can talk about that. But I started to pose the question, what percentage of people are actually in that true self that we talk about from a parts standpoint? And like, really, if we were to put it in a pie chart, like, what would that be? And the different stages, right, of adult development, you could look to so many different psychologists and researchers and whatnot. But what I was actually looking from it, doing some of my research, was more so from that IFS standpoint, that Keegan, I don't want to say it's Richard Keegan, but I forgot his first name, Keegan's adult stages of development, and just developmental theory, adult developmental theory in a nutshell. And what I found the research kind of breaking down to in 3 different components: the reactive and like survival mode, which is that quote unquote like adapted child, the child psychologically that is just acting completely out of impulse, has no impulse control whatsoever, is not developed, right? The percentage of adults, it seems as though, given the research, that are operating within that mindset, that central nervous system, that level of development is around 80 to 70% of the population, the adult population. So what that means is around 80%, 70 to 80% of the adult population might be biologically an adult, but psychologically are an absolute toddler. Yeah.
Holy shit.
We break it down. Subset number 3. Okay.
Honestly, I'm not surprised by that. Like, I'm like, the
Right.
number is alarming, but with the amount of work that you and I have done one-on-one with people, I'm not actually surprised by that.
Yeah.
That's so
Which-
sad.
Sadness comes up for me too, because like when I really look at like the other 2 subsets where it's just like, okay, so you're just acting in survival mode like your entire day. That's 70 to 80% of the adult population. And the question that I think about is like, as a kid, you think when you look at adults, like they have everything figured out. When in reality, that's not the case whatsoever. And it's, I'm not saying we all need to have things figured out. As a matter of fact, I think that we'd probably be better off with a little bit more creativity in our lives and a little unknown in our lives just for other neurological impacts. But like, there's such a power play when it comes to the development of children. And this is where really it starts to kind of get even more concerning. What quote unquote adults know and tell and teach their children or their nieces and their nephews and, you know, people that they are affiliated with, they're teaching these things from a child's psychology. They're not actually operating as a functional, psychologically developed adult. Like functional adults, those who are relatively, and I use that word very loosely, relatively developed, relatively emotionally regulated, meaning you're at a barbecue with your friends, your adult friends. Someone says, girl, I don't freaking like your dress or something like that. And you start to kind of like freak out, but then you're like, okay, we don't need to go like nix her as a friend or whatever. Like that's relatively, right? And this is relatively self-led, meaning there's glimmers of their true self coming forward. Maybe. That's like the functional adult that's developed. That's between 15 and 25%. Okay, so what does that actually freaking mean? When we start to look at like the polyvagal theory and how this overlaps within it, this is what is most concerning. Again, not surprising, but concerning. Those who are what's called self-authoring, meaning like charting the course of their own future, their own destiny, becoming more of that like transformational adult, right? When you think of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's the adult that like exists in the top part of the pyramid that's helping others and helping to transcend human being and human consciousness and like less than 5%, 5 to 10% of adults, biological adults, are actually that level of developed. So the mismatch between biological development and psychological development, the gap is so much bigger than any of us can comprehend. And the implications of that, people are having children and it's great. And that's beautiful and amazing. But when we really look at that from this adult developmental lens, children who are operating within survival mode, reactivity, are having children. And that is what I want to have a dialogue around. And that is terrifying me for the future. Personally, there's an element of terror. And just in terms of like the neurobiological components of epigenetics and passing down that dysregulated central nervous system, the complete lack of coping skills and development psychologically that people are passing down to their child, like there's just none of that going on. Now, granted, if we were to zoom out big picture, it's better than it has been, but the rates aren't where we need it to be. And I say that because of with technology exponentially, if you were to look at like a time on your x-axis and y over like the exponential increase of technology and knowledge and information and whatnot. Like there's an exponential growth curve of technology, but the actual integration of awareness for our species, that gap is like so freaking low, and it's terrifying because the gap between how technology is helping our life go and how we can actually regulate and respond to life. We're children. We're literally toddlers. Most of us walking around are toddlers in our central nervous system, in our emotional regulation system, in our psychological development. Like that, I'm telling you, that is a big issue. And it's going to continue to be a big issue because the rate at which we're psychologically developing as adults, especially considering the lack of control that adults now have on themselves, is getting lower as a result of their inability to distance themselves from technology, which reduces their focus flow, attention span, all that happy jazz. It's just, yeah, I'm going to end there. So where do you want to dig in?
Hello, my name is Bree. So I would say my experience at Evolve has been absolutely amazing. I have learned and grown and done so many things that I didn't imagine that I'd be doing just over a year ago. So I'm really happy to be a part of the team, and I encourage anyone who has the opportunity to join. So this is an experience that I don't think I would have gotten anywhere else. So it's definitely unique, and there's so many like-minded people, whether it's on the team or in our community, that can be by your side and support you. So that is an awesome experience.
I shared a very vulnerable truth on episode 410, where I disclosed the fact that I have been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And I'm on the lower end of the spectrum, and I've done so much work on my mental health and my emotion regulation and my cognitive processing to where I'm not really affected by it anymore, and not to the degree that I used to be. It's still there and it still pops up, but not anywhere to where it used to be. And that happened, and the reason why that developed in me was because I was a child in an environment with people who were severely emotionally underdeveloped, and there wasn't even technology back then. There's so many of us that are struggling nowadays as adult children of emotionally immature parents. That book, Emilia, you suggested that book to me. It changed my life.
Dr. Lindsay Gibson. Great work. Which is amazing.
I'm reading this book right now. It's called Validation. I gotta look up who it's called. It's like The Art of Validation or something like that. Validation, how the skill set that revolutionized psychology will transform, and then I can't see the end of it. It's by Carolyn Fleck, PhD. And she talks about validation and how invalidation is one of the biggest things that creates BPD and a lot of these other mental health disorders and PTSD and whatever. And how to validate and how to actually support and be there for other people. And the majority of us now as adults grew up in homes and in environments and around families and around with educators and whoever else that were emotionally immature adults who had no capacity for their own self-regulation. They had no sense of identity. They had no sense of autonomy. They weren't long-term strategic thinkers, and they had no idea how to regulate their own nervous systems enough to be able to actually be there for us. I know a lot of people who are teachers that shouldn't be because they're such a shit show in their personal life. It's like, how are you going to be there to teach children? And this isn't just about kids, but this is about people in general. We're getting, to your point, we are getting so much better. There has been so much progress, and it is so beautiful. But there is still so much wrong with this world, and there is still so much wrong with the way that adults are living their lives and the very few people who actually go seek help and who actually will get treatment to be better human beings so that more people don't have to suffer. It's so far and few between. There is so much unnecessary pain and suffering in this world because so few people are actually willing to acknowledge the fact that, yeah, I'm emotionally unintelligent. I'm insanely emotionally dysregulated. I don't know how to think intelligently and strategically. I'm a very impulsive human being, and I don't want to be this way anymore, and I'm going to go get help. Instead, so many people hide behind ego, and they hide behind, I don't have the money, and they hide behind systems that enable them to continue being the way that they are, because you can hide a lot of these things. And how many people are suffering as a result of it? Emilia and I are case examples. You talked about the trauma that you experienced and the fact that you didn't feel safe enough to tell anybody about what happened to you, because nobody around you was a safe person and a safe adult for you to be able to say, something really bad happened to me. I stayed in an abusive relationship because I didn't feel as though I can go to the people in my life and get help without shame and without harm. And think of how many people are experiencing that. I mean, you and I see clients every single week, day after day after day. You and I are seeing clients who are going through these very same struggles. This world is a lot of people who are very nihilistic. I understand it. I really do. There's a lot of really terrible things in this world. And we do have the power to change it. We do have the power. If you're sitting here listening to this podcast, which if you are, good for you, because a lot of people probably either avoided this or they shut it the hell off and they're like, nope, I'm not listening to that. If you are still listening to this, number one, good for you. And number two, just because you're an adult doesn't mean that you're emotionally and cognitively an adult. I wasn't. I make a joke about this, and I've joked about this, but it is serious. I didn't start making good decisions until about a year ago. And a lot of the good decisions that I made were because of Emilia and because of me wanting her validation, if I'm really being honest. I didn't actually start making really good decisions until about a year ago, and it radically changed my life in that short period of time. Imagine how much your life could improve. I was a emotionally belligerent human being. My emotions dictated everything I did. I was so dysregulated. I couldn't get my shit together to save my life. And now I don't even remember what it was like being that person. I look at old photos and old videos and I'm like, what the actual fuck was going on? Like, who is that? I don't even recognize that person. So many of us are children in adults' bodies, and it's not okay. And I don't say that to shame you, to anybody. I don't say it to shame anybody. I say it because something needs to change. And we all know this, right? It's not like any of us are like, no, that's not true. Deep down, unconsciously, subconsciously, we all know this. And we all have people in our life that it's like, how the hell are you an adult? You're not an adult. You're a child. It's impacting so many people. And this world is suffering because of it. And the amount of people that in 5-10 years, when technology continues to advance, literally cannot function in the world, it's going to be alarming. And the gap between those who have and those who don't, and the gap between the emotionally intelligent and the emotionally unaware, is only going to get worse and worse and worse unless something changes now. And if you are listening to this now, again, good for you. And this is the wake-up call that I think you needed. because it's the one that I needed. I needed this. I wish I had this back then. I wish it didn't take me 30 years to get to this point. But I started where I was. And you can start where you are too. You can make changes here and now for you too.
You know what's so fascinating is as you grow, like as you actually grow, here's an interesting paradox. And this will probably be my closing sentiment. As you grow, you realize in hindsight how little you had grown. And that's what's wild. So anyone who's been listening to our podcast, it always feels like the last year we've grown. But if we were to contrast that with like the last 5 years, it's like, holy crap, we've grown so much. And when we look at other people, they're not able to say the same.
No.
And this quote resonates with me deeply because I care so deeply about people's growth more than they can even fathom on their own accord. Are you living, I think it's something along the lines of, does that person have 40 years of experience, or do they have 1 year of the same experience 40 times? It's like, woof, how many people are just living the same year day in, day out, psychologically speaking, right? Because biologically, your body's moving through time. You cannot change that. But psychological development, what I think is fascinating, actually requires the human biology to go and develop itself. And I think that like self-development, right? Like that is only a byproduct of your willingness to put yourself in the ring. And most people, and I'm saying the ring like boxing, most people, when they are just in self-preservation mode, they're not going to have a risk tolerance or a risk appetite or an interest or an innate desire to go and put themselves and learn about personal development and learn about neuroscience and learn about adult development and psychology and all these things that impact who we end up becoming in 5 years. Unfortunately, so many people just wait until the pain comes. And thank goodness for neuroplasticity, because we can change. And the research continues to show that, you know, as soon as you really start to set your mind to things, you can start to have that brain work for you. However, the missed opportunity of how many years you're spent at like this stagnant 17-year-old brain is just wild. And we haven't even begun to put in substances into that equation, or poor sleep, and how that exponentially decreases the curve of not only adults' biological longevity, but how that actually impacts the brain, which then hinders to an extent their psychological development. So woof, if you've ever been that person that's like, how am I talking? Like, you know, I have so many clients that will be like, I just got off the phone with my dad. I cannot believe this man. Like, how has this man gone through life like this? He's like a child. I cannot handle it. Like, it's just, it's alarming. And it is that cry for concern that I know far more people are sharing with us behind the scenes, but maybe don't have the courage to share in more public facing medias. And so on behalf of the community, evolved community that we hear your concerns, you know, we want to share this sentiment. And if you're not already doing some type of quote unquote work towards your own adult psychological development, you're actively a part of this problem. And I know it feels like a call out, but this is more so an invitation and a call forward, because our future generations really do need adults, quote unquote, biologically, that are also adult psychologically developed, not just more man children in this world, or not just more female children in this world, or woman childs in this world. Like, we have plenty of that, right? So with that being said, like I said at the very beginning of this episode, 359, how to disentangle from emotionally immature people, is my episode suggestion. Because if you are finding yourself at whatever age you are, and realizing like, dang, I'm way more in that survival state most of my days, you are in that 80 to 70% of the population of adults that are not, unless you actively prioritize that, are not going to psychologically develop. You're just going to decline. So use that as an opportunity to maybe get in the arena where it could develop you. B.
Jesus. 385, are you protecting your inner child? This was a very heavy topic, and we know that, but we also know that so many people need to hear this, and they need to hear somebody else talking about it. So maybe send this episode to someone that you think needs to hear this. Just a slide, just like send it in their DMs and be like, you might not want to listen to this.
Yeah, I
and
love
if you
and please do something about this.
Yeah. And if you want to make sure that you are becoming the most adultiest adult that you can be, which God knows I needed that. Evolve Ventures group coaching is going to be starting in a couple of weeks. We've already had a couple people sign up. We don't want you to miss out on this amazing, amazing opportunity. This is a once-a-year chance for you to learn the things that your parents never taught you, to learn the things that your school never taught you, and for you to finally be the person that you needed when you needed an adult. So if that is something that you need and that you want, please send us a DM. The link is in the description down below if you want to learn more about it. You can go to evolveventurestech.com, go to where it says programs, and then go to where it says Evolve Ventures Group Coaching. All of the information is there. Or you can send us a DM and we will give you all of the information that you need. But be the person that you wish you had. This is your chance to take a step toward that. And we cannot wait to see you there. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.